由斯嘉丽·约翰逊主演的漫改真人版电影《攻壳机动队》即将于2017年登陆全球院线。前有押井守的剧场版动画树立标杆，后有无数粉丝挑剔的目光和舆论压力。本片导演鲁伯特·山德斯此番距离影片特效，力邀世界顶级视效公司维塔工作室强力助阵，力求还原漫画原作精髓。时光网日前独家探访位于新西兰的维塔工作室总部，对话影片创意设计幕后团队，揭开真人版《攻壳机动队》的特效秘密，也提前分享影片视效的诸多看点。
Initially, it was just working with the director to try to figure out what he was going to bring to it, because we work in service to the film and in service to the director. So probably the biggest thing initially was just coming to terms with what kind of vision Rupert wanted to bring to screen, and then how best to kind of help him.
The initial concept was drawn from the original animation, and really beautiful artwork, and it evolved over the months that we were working on it.
Absolutely, yeah.
Every step we took it, we could see more that could be done with it, and the designers couldn't but. They had their say, and Rupert, of course, the director, he had his ideas, so we worked it all together, yeah.
This is Major. I'm on site.
I think it was a good decision that Rupert made too about taking the elements of the Ghost in the Shell universe from the manga, from the anime, from the TV series, and painting a picture with those elements that was new. I mean, there was some magic, as Larry says, with you and the comic book artist, like with you and an author, that's just the picture that you paint reading these words. But there was a magic in the anime film I found, particularly the way that film accumulated and ended up, that it changed the way I thought about the world in many ways. And it was wise of Rupert to say these are fantastical elements that say a lot about who we are as a species and where we're going, but not trying to recapture any of that. I think that would have been a big mistake. He's told something very new with those tool set, those brush strokes that have been used in other places. Yeah. And the temptation is always there to do your adaptation exactly as it occurs, or something close to, and then twist it one way just a little bit. But I think this was different again. Yeah. And I think that was brave.
When you look at the source material, the manga, and what Shirow and Masamune put together, you just want to protect that in a lot of ways, just because it's so genius, and just to think that trying to bring what his original intent was to screen would probably be the source material. And that's what a workshop in general, like usually when we're engaged, that's what we like to bring. We like to protect the source material and really dig in there and look at it, and then try to figure out what the spirit of that material is, and try to figure out how to bring that to screen.
The workshop in general have this attitude that we'd like to bring something new to every project we do, and that, I don't know, I'd say for myself, and it probably goes for you too, Larry, that Ghost in the Shell moved the medium of animation forward, and even film forward too. I mean, some pretty big existential questions you put in there that influence people like the Wachowskis to make The Matrix and so forth. And so we all considered it a pretty important piece of cinema, and if we were going to work on it, you could be a little hesitant. Do we really want to do this? But when you really come down to it, we want to move film forward and the medium forward itself, and we saw it as an opportunity.
I don't know who to trust.
You trust me, right?
I know I have a past. I'll find out who I was.
Whoever brings something to screen first wins. And so just across the board, we're doing that for any film. We're like, if somebody has done something, then it's almost off limits. This one's particularly egregious, just because so many people have gone in, especially with the '92 film, and because a lot of the world doesn't necessarily watch anime, they don't realize that a lot of live-action films have ripped off, essentially, what Mamoru Oshii and those guys had did in '92. So to that point, yeah, we were very, like when we were designing sort of scenes and little vignettes, we were very conscious of trying to figure out, like, what, if we're translating from, say, the manga itself, and that's sort of 2D and, line work or whatever, what could we extrapolate out of there and then and visualize that in a photographic.
I'm going in.
Well, for you guys, what was sort of, I guess, the base idea of what this suit was meant to do and needed to do, and how those two ideas maybe challenged one another?
I guess we needed it to look like something that hadn't been done before to begin with, because she's not wearing clothing. She's android. It's not that it's a skin, yeah,
it was actually quite a hard, I wouldn't say it was a hard brief to follow, but it was hard to establish what exactly it was, because it's not a suit, but it's not her skin, so and it sort of needed to move as like a skin, like it would be a synthetic skin as opposed to a costume element, but it kind of was. It's a very hard one to peg, that one.
It was really interesting watching it on screen, particularly on the arms, on the sleeves. It would look like partly skin and then partly garment, all in one. It was really interesting. Yeah. Definitely had a lot of challenges.
We didn't know we were going to use silicon. We knew we wanted to use silicon, but we weren't sure that we were going to be able to use silicon. So we did a whole bunch of material tests and R&D, and just got to a point where everyone was happy. We assembled some very, very basic limbs, glued them together, put people in them, and just worked through those processes till we got to a point that we were ready to commit to actually starting to make some pieces, and that's when we got Flo involved with her exceptional knowledge of pattern cutting, because this really did come down to pattern cutting. You cut a pattern out of a normal piece of fabric and you can tweak it a little bit. Once this is done, this is done. There's no adding a bit on here or cutting a bit more off here. It's got to be bang on.
All of our individual pattern pieces were molded and cast in the silicon, so they were 3D. Well, I created the pattern shapes. They went to the 3D department where they digitized it, milled it out in acrylic to create a mold, which went to Jace's team. They poured the silicon and laid in the mesh fabric that we used as a base. Then it would come back to our team. We'd cut them up, and these beautiful pieces with all the detail molded into them. It was just incredible.
The temptation is to go to Blade Runner or Akira,
Yeah.
if you're referencing anime. I think a really helpful aspect was having Jan Rolfs involved from the beginning too, because he was the one who tended to guide us towards the 80s and 90s, the bright colors, the big shoulder pads and the costumes, the things that set at least the first anime film in its period.
And I think Jan was also genius in that way of trying to we wasn't consciously trying to avoid certain films that have come that have stolen from that, but just also Jan's kind of idea was that pare it back to simplicity, because that stuff, that films become a little bit more timeless. They don't feel like they're if you follow a trend at the particular time, they can be spotted as the film lives on. So he was very, very conscious to try to pare it back and make it so it was as sort of simplistic looking as possible when it could be, to try to, I think, engage and hold on to that timelessness. So hopefully it'll have its own look from that reason.
Not complexity for complexity's sake, but yeah, he really steered away from that. And that was refreshing for us too, because it made, as Larry will tell you, the designs that we actually did, which I hope will be released to the world, a lot of them are very elegant just as pieces of artwork.
Yeah.
And I think the way they were translated into the movie was really, really cool. Art department, costume, makeup, everyone did a really good job of taking some pretty tricky briefs and bringing them to life.
I would say is that where you sort of do end up being restricted when you're especially translating from one medium to another would just be that, you know, there's something about the manga when you're reading what Shirow was trying to communicate that's a little dense, and it's really, really good when you're reading it because, you know, it's just you and that author sort of exchanging mental notes or whatever, but oftentimes it's a bit hard to translate that kind of stuff to the big screen because this big screen is more action focused or more tends to need to be, I wouldn't say less thoughtful, but it's just a different medium. I don't even think oftentimes when the Japanese are making anime that they're thinking of it as completely Japanese cast. They really aren't in a lot of anime. And especially in manga as well. I mean, Shirow was saying this is a future, and in that future, even Japan's sort of multicultural, which is making quite an interesting statement about Japan.
Rupert made specific comments on how cosmopolitan he wanted it, and he had some guidance, but a lot of that was through the idea that a new faction had formed in the film, which was it the Four Powers, which is Japan, the United States, Great Britain, and China, had formed a new world power. And you take all of those countries and their territories, you'll get a heck of a mix of ethnicities and cultures all flung together.
Everyone around me, they feel connected to something. Connected to something I'm not. What are you?
I think Shirow was making this point in the manga back then, in the 80s, in terms of, you know, for him, he was talking to Japan, his audience. And that's just saying that, you know, Japan is a very homogeneous society. And so for it to be multicultural is a very science fiction idea. And so I think it kind of fits very lockstep with, you know, the kind of the film that we've made. It's just a very science fiction idea that, you know, essentially take Japan and then why the heck is it all of a sudden a very multicultural society? It just says something quite different. There's a lot of things in film that you won't see from 20, 30 feet away with a camera, but Weta Workshop doesn't really care about that. You know,
anyway.
It does the stitching, it puts engravings on swords that you just would, you know, you just wouldn't see it. You'll never see it as a person that's watching a camera. So I think the first part of that is it's really, you know, as a person kind of growing up and being a bit of a nerd, it's really nice coming into a place where people care about those kind of things, infusing things with as much earnest honesty and care for source material and care for the spirit of the film. So there's that part of it. Weta tries to foster that and tries to find people that embrace that kind of thing.
The film industry sort of shrank when digital effects came along, and the practical effects that Weta continues to do, especially in a small country like New Zealand, it's hard to be a specialist. You've got to be good at a lot of things if you want to survive making movies here. And that Weta and Richard and Tanya, who first sort of brought the workshop to life, are equally big fans of trying their hands at a lot of things. And they put value in that as well. Value in craft, value in attention to detail, and that not just in building it, but the thought behind it too is just as valuable.